So this is all to do with external position. This is all to be thinking about the relationship you're going to have with customers. Okay? You can sell customers dolls, or you can sell customers experience. I know that sounds cheap, but it's really true. Where are you going to be in the channel? Initially, American Girl was all about mail order. And then it moved up, moved into retail, and moved in a big way. How would it actually do this? We're going to provide some readings that talk about how do you actually put a new doll on the shelf in this business. Okay? It's something you have to think about. And also, what about your supply chain? Now, obviously, in this case, you're going to sell a $100 doll. You can make it. It's a little bit easier to make than the stuff you see elsewhere. And you'll want that too, because you're trying to get an heirloom, and then you're trying to get people to buy accessories and things like that. And if your daughter doll gets one outfit and your daughter's going to get the matching outfit, it's probably going to be also good quality. These are all part of external positioning. Okay, and these are choices that American Girl made, and as a result, there are no competitors. Here in Canada, there's a Canada Girl, and it doesn't quite come up to it. And American Girl is coming into Canada as well. After all, it is North America. Final. Let me pause. Just one example of that external positioning was this company initially called Price Club, and the Price Club had a membership model. Whereby you paid for membership, and then you came into this like warehouse and you could buy stuff in bulk. Okay, it's the inventor of it. Believe it or not, this is Mr. Price. I don't know if that was a coincidence or anything like that, but you know, it's kind of interesting. And as a founder, he liked to claim that he read the Daily Worker instead of the Wall Street Journal. He was considerably more generous with benefits and wages than other discounters, Walton included, and unlike Walton in those days, Price gave money to the charities generously and often through a foundation he created to which he handed $70 million. Okay, so we have this person who wanted to allow cheap bulk goods made in an exclusive club, treated his workers well, and eventually this company became Costco. Okay, Costco today had its origins with a founder who was reading the Daily Worker rather than the Wall Street Journal.
All this philosophy and the culture and the things we believe in, it all started at FedMart.
My father had a couple of clients who had come to him with this concept of putting a membership discount store in San Diego, which opened in December of 1954. The store was a success from the day it started.
The concept was great. It was a membership discount store.
FedMart was limited selection, high quality, at the lowest price.
The leader, who was Saul Price, instilled that in everybody. His concept was so simple, it made such sense.
To represent the customer, to represent the employee in a way that maximized the value of the relationship. Jim attributes so much of his success and the way he approaches business to the fact that he works along with my dad and had such respect for my dad.
Jim didn't start out as a box boy, as everyone thinks. He actually started out throwing mattresses around the warehouse.
He was carrying these mattresses on his back. He hears someone behind him yelling and screaming at him, "Hey, you, put that mattress down. What are you trying to do? You're going to hurt your back and then we'll wind up being sued." And Jim didn't know who was talking to him, and he asked the guy he was working with, "Who the hell was that guy?" And of course it was Saul Price.
Jim and the group from FedMart go back many, many years.
While I was serving in a senior executive position, Jim ran the best part of the FedMart operation. He had tremendous respect from everybody.
Robert Price called us all together. He says, I want to appoint a head merchant. So he handed out these ballots. Jim got all 10 votes, including his own, which I thought was hilarious.
The FedMart story concluded in December of 1975 when, after having sold the business to another party, my father was fired by those people. And in February of 1976, we incorporated the Price Company. And then in July of that same year, we opened the Price Club.
By April 1st, 76, he had found this facility here at Marina Boulevard. We agreed that it would be membership and that the wholesale members would pay $25 a year. We wanted a 100,000 square foot building, a cavernous warehouse, and we were going to put steel racks down both sides and have the middle of it be at a very low profile so that the member would come in and they'd be able to look from the front of the building to the back of the building, and all they would see is masses of merchandise. We opened with a dud. It was underwhelming. We didn't have a lot of people show up, and it was scary.
Most people don't know this, but racquetball played a huge role in the development of the warehouse club business.
Jim was still with FedMart. He was running FedMart at this point, and he used to come and play racquetball with us at a facility that was right next door to us. And one day he says to us, you know, they're selling balls and rackets here. He says, this is retail business, why can't you do it?
And we ended up finally going down and looking at the zoning maps and determining that we could do retail. And once that happened, we were able to combine wholesale and retail, change the products, change the hours, change just about everything other than the philosophy, and the business took off.
Before that occurred, the Price Club was not very successful.
Can you imagine if we had closed the doors? None of this would have happened. There wouldn't have ever been a Price Club, a merger, or a Costco, and it wouldn't have changed the whole retail industry.
My dad got me interested in coming down to see the Price Club, and I went down, and it was about 9 in the morning, midweek. When I drove in, the entire parking lot was full, and the people were standing in line waiting for the doors to open. And I thought, well, there's some special promotion going on today. It'll be interesting to see what it is, what they've done to stir up the populace. And of course, they open the doors, people stream in, and it wasn't a special day at all. It was just a concept that had captured the imagination of a lot of people. In addition to that, I had been in Europe and I had seen a hypermarket, specifically a company called Carrefour. And I thought that some combination of those would make a lot of sense.
I get a call one day, probably around 1982, and it's a guy by the name of Jeff Brotman from Seattle. He says, I saw the Price Club. I'm considering starting a similar operation in Seattle, Washington. And he said, would you be interested in coming up here and working for us?
He was the head merchant at Price Club, and I thought, perfect. He would be someone who could really run the merchandising side of the business, if not the entire business. I didn't know that he was related to Saul Price.
I said, I'm satisfied where I am. He said, okay, do you happen to know anyone that could do it? I said, there's one guy in the country can do it, and that's Jim Sinegal. And they got together, and the rest is history.
I called Jim, and Jim was Jim. He was very straightforward. It was pretty clear to me that every aspect of what it would take to be successful in the warehouse club business, Jim knew about, had probably done himself.
We were in California, and our daughter Susie was in high school, and she didn't want to move, and I just kept telling her to ignore him because it was never going to happen. This fellow Jeff had shown up with this big idea.
We put the business plan together. We thought we needed about $3.5 million to start the business. We were wildly oversubscribed. We ended up taking $7.5 million. Jim and I turned to each other at the close and we said, we will never need another nickel to grow this business. And of course, about 9 months later, we raised an additional $17 million. And about a year after that, an additional $30 million as the business grew.
There was 8 of us that got together in April of 1983. We didn't even have a name at the time, and we didn't even have a building.
The energy was so strong and so positive that you wanted to just be a part of it.
I came to Costco to run operations. Of course, when I started with Costco, we didn't have any operations, so it was a pretty easy job.
He hired 4 kind of rogue managers, me being one of them.
I had no idea what Costco was, and when I went in for the interview, I thought, well, I could do this.
I figured that it had about a 50-50 chance of survival.
I came to Costco when there were 2 warehouses opened.
I met Jim in Los Angeles, started in April of 1984.
My first name badge, which still is in the old one window of fame, has Costco Wholesale Club on it.
Jim came through and said he was starting up a Price Club type operation in the Northwest. I jumped at the chance.
Jim and Jeff were naive enough to think I knew what to do. And they said, you want to come out and be our VP of Finance?
It was like the Wild West. We ran the business by the seat of our pants.
The people who had left their lives in San Diego or Los Angeles or wherever they came from and moved to Seattle were moving on the basis of their faith in many instances in Jim.
When Jim opened up Costco, followed him right to Seattle.
And no guarantees of anything. There were no contracts or anything like that. Just the concept that we knew of the Price Club being successful and knowing a guy by the name of Jim Senegal's ethics and drive. And that was it.
I'll provide some readings about this one too. It's a fascinating story. Finally, ecosystem. Jeff Bezos explicitly chose to locate Amazon, its headquarters, in Seattle, in Washington. Okay? It could get tech resources, that's where Microsoft was, that's where Boeing was. It didn't have to worry about that same funding. It had already had funding. That was the link Bezos himself. He came from Wall Street. But it built up an ecosystem right then and there because it was a good place to be able to build out warehouses and experiment with them and have a headquarters. Now Amazon is choosing a second headquarters, but this is 20 years later. It chose its ecosystem, and its ecosystem served it well. For the firms that you'll be dealing with in the Creative Destruction Lab, the choice is usually between staying in Canada versus going to Silicon Valley. And at some point, there will be that choice, unless, of course, they're already in Silicon Valley, as some of them are. And those choices are really difficult. The benefits to going to Silicon Valley are obvious. A lot of successful firms, the ecosystem is already there. A lot of the resources are available. It's a little expensive, depending on where you want to live in Silicon Valley, but that's the trade-off. Staying in Canada, well, there are different things. One is you are potentially in a smaller pond. That reduces the competition for certain resources. But on the other hand, there is less of a funding ecosystem, but there is government involvement. These are the trade-offs that you will have to weigh. And it's all part of the choice of identity.